Alrighty, so let's get going. A couple announcements first. Well, not even a couple, just one. Um, this kind of makes me mad because I wish I would have known this a little bit before. But I was talking with Inner Server, and those jerks withheld this from me. And like they knew I was a teacher, they knew I taught you guys, and then out of the blue they're like, "Oh, by the way, students can have hosting with us for a year for free." And I'm like, "What?" Like, I mean, thank you so much for letting me know now, but holy crap, I wish I would have known that a half a year ago. So, I don't know, Polly, if there's a time to leave GoDaddy now, it's this, right? So, anyways, of course you're almost done, so maybe
Yeah.
not, maybe not. But anyways, Charles, if you want, I know you were like not a fan of having to pay, so you can get a year of Inner Server for free. All you got to do is just sign up with your school address, or they say contact us. So you can probably sign up with a normal email, and then just contact them and be like, "Hey, look, I'm a student," and then they probably send you an email to your Art Institute email, and then you can verify it. But that's if you want to. You don't have to. I just wanted to let you guys know about it because that's pretty awesome. Not very many hosts do this. So if you want, take a look. But yeah, I'm pretty sure you'd still have to pay for a domain. But again, my guess is it would still be the $2 for the year. So, you're paying $2 for a year of hosting and your own domain. That's a sick deal. That's pretty dang awesome. So, anyways, take a look at it if you want.
Jordan finally convinced me to buy one, and I got a domain, and I'm using Inner Server.
Okay, so just contact them and say, "Hey, I'm a student," and they should be able to go in there and give you the year credit. So,
Even if I'm already paying?
Yeah, pretty sure.
Oh, okay.
Pretty dang sure. Even if you're already signed up, you can just say, "Hey, my teacher just let me know about this." Just chat with them and say, "I heard you have the year free for students," and I'm sure they'll be able to hook you up. So, I definitely check that out. And then this is just FYI. If you guys know any nonprofits, if you work with any nonprofits, they offer free hosting forever for nonprofits, which is pretty awesome. So if you work with any of them, or if you volunteer for them or something, and they're paying out the rear end for hosting or something, let them know about this because that's pretty generous. I think it's pretty good. Anyways, there you go. So today we're not going to be we're mainly going to be doing background stuff again. So boo hiss, you're going to have to turn in some screenshots because this is something that if you did this, I wouldn't be able to tell on Heroku because again, this is behind the scenes stuff. So we're going to be doing database migrations today, which is basically a little file you can create that gives a bunch of commands on how to create a database and what type of tables it should put in there and what columns it should put in those tables and so forth. So we have to kind of review a little bit databases. Some of this stuff is review from the PHP class, but also some of it's going to be a little bit new. So obviously, here I'll type it out here. There's just a couple terms here we need to be aware of. So database, okay, this is obvious, easy enough. It's just a set of tables. Okay, in PHP class we only had the one table, but you can have a thing called a relational, I think it's called relational database, which basically means it has a bunch of tables that interact with each other. So if you hear the term relational database, it just means there's a bunch of tables that have columns inside of those tables that talk with other tables. So all the different tables can have relations and hook up with each other to swap information and all that kind of stuff. Okay, then we have a table, right, which is just a set of columns and rows. Okay, we created that in the PHP class. Now, We talked about the MVC model or the MVC architecture, the model view control, and we haven't done much in models. But usually what happens in Rails, usually one model is going to be one table in the database. And there we go. Okay, so when we start talking about tables, we had that picture a couple weeks ago that just shows how a model can communicate with the database, grab the information, give it back to the controller, then the controller hands it off to the view. So usually in the Rails architecture, a model has a corresponding table. So it basically has, so one model would have a corresponding table that it interacts with. Okay, then we got the columns inside of those tables. It's usually a set of data of some sort of of a single type. Okay, like examples would be like first name, last name, email, password, blah, blah, blah. Another thing that we need to realize for today is columns can have a type, and we did a little bit of this in PHP as well. So they can be a string column, they can be an integer column, they can be a Boolean, okay, and so forth. We'll be creating those today. Okay, and then a row and record are kind of used interchangeably, just like field and column are as well. I should probably put that there as well. So we got field and column, row and record are basically the same thing. So this is usually a single record of data. So it would be, Dave for a first name. It'd be Kid for the last name column. Basically a single record of data inside of that column. So email, password, okay, that's what a row is. Okay, and now we have something that it's a little new, is there's an index, and we're going to be creating these as well. So what these do is this is a data structure on a table that increases lookup speed. So if you have something in a database that's going to need to be searched, then you need to have it be an index, because what that allows is it makes it so the Rails application can search the database a lot quicker. So for the assignment, there's going to be certain columns where you're going to add indexes to so they can be searched quickly. Okay, the next one that's a little bit different than we haven't really talked about is a foreign key. Okay, and it's a table column whose value reference rows in another table. All right, so you got a foreign key in one table, and it basically uses that foreign key to look up information in another table. So this is where you start getting that relational database thing going on, is you have columns inside of tables going and looking at other columns and other tables and back and forth. So you have to define when you're creating a database what's going to be that foreign key. What columns are going to be foreign keys that are going to interact with other tables, or I guess other rows on other tables. Okay. Now we got a schema. This is just the structural. I know these are like textbook definitions here. Definition of a database. So basically written out instructions on what a database is going to look like and how it's going to be set up. Okay, it defines tables, columns, indexes, rows. Basically everything that's inside of the database is defined in the schema. Okay, and we did a little bit of that a couple weeks ago, and we were dumping the schema. But there was nothing in that database, so there wasn't anything in the schema. But we'll look at the schemas later on to see what happens in there. And then there's this industry term called CRUD. It's an acronym for create, read, update, and delete, which is basically the 4 things you do to databases. Either create rows, create columns, create tables, create databases. You read them, you go in there and see what's in them, you update them, you change, you get in there and update records, or you change the information in there, or you delete them. So if you ever hear CRUD, that's what they're talking about. Now there's a bunch of other important SQL commands. There's show database, but I'm really not going to go through all of them just because we're going to be using pgadmin, and all of the different SQL commands that we would need to know, we're not going to need to know because we're going to be in that user interface with pgadmin. Okay. And the last one, well, is it the last one? And this is what we're going to be spending most of our time today, is DB migration, so database migrations. This is just a set of instructions written in Ruby, okay, that migrate your database from one state to another. And we're going to be creating these today. So the reason why these are cool and these are important is because if you have multiple people working on databases and you want to have the exact same database on one server moved over to another, you just create a migration file that will set it up on the other server or wherever you're going to move it. And these files contain basically instructions on what tables to create, what columns to create, what type of columns they're going to be, and all this other stuff that I'll show you when we get into it. Okay, the good thing about the migrations, like I said, it's easy to migrate from one to one. And then also if you're creating a ton of different databases that are all going to have the same things in them, then it makes it a lot easier. You just create that one file and you just run the migration over and over again, and it just easily creates these databases for you. Okay, and the other big one is it's written in Ruby. So we can interact with databases, we can update databases, we can delete them, we can change them, do all this stuff in the Ruby language instead of having to go in there and do it all in SQL. And I think that's probably the biggest plus there. Because even in PHP we had to write SQL. We just had SQL kind of injected inside the PHP code, where Ruby actually has its own methods and its own commands that will actually mess with the database. So let's open up the command prompt. And let's see here. I got to get into another directory. This is the one I'm doing with you guys. So get into the directory of your app. Give you a few seconds to do that.
Jordan did text me, by the way. He won't be able to join today.
He won't?
Yeah.
Okay, just tell him we're creating the video, and he can just watch it in his own time.
Okay.
All right, and I'm going to open this in Atom, so Atom space period. I want to open that project up in Atom. Okay, so this is what we did last week. Okay, you guys ready?
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Cool. So first thing there's two different ways to create migration files. The first one is you just generate a migration file. The second way, what we're going to do in a minute, is you generate a model. When you generate a model, It's kind of the same thing as generating a controller, but when you generate the model, it creates a migration file with it. So we're going to say Rails generate migration, and then we're going to name it. Now, the way you name it is you got to do it in camel case. Well, actually, I don't know if you have to, but that's the way that it recommends you do it. So I'm going to call this one do nothing yet. Because we're going to create this migration, but this one really won't do anything. This is going to be kind of a test one. First of all, to see if it works. Second of all, to just show you certain things without messing around with the databases that we've made. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter.
Do you think you can move your command prompt to the left a little bit? Thanks.
Is that good? Yep.
Yeah, the join.me circles for covering some of it.
Oh, yeah. That's really annoying they added that. But yeah, no problem. All right, so it says it invoked the active record, which is database lingo that I think we'll talk about someday. And then it created inside of the DB file, and then it created a folder called migrate, and then it created this thing called do nothing yet.rb. So let's take a look at that. All right, so we got our DB file, we got migrate, or not DB file, but the folder, and then we got the migrate folder, and then we have this do nothing yet migration file. So you can see how it names it. It's kind of interesting. It puts in the date, so 2017 131. And to be honest, I have no idea what these other numbers would mean. If you guys know, please tell me. But 195, I would think maybe the time, 1953. What is that, 12 set? No? Yeah, I have no idea. All I know is 2017 131. That's the date. This, I'm guessing, is just random numbers they throw in here. But this is basically this is considered like the version number. And if you want to migrate to a certain version of a database, and we'll get into that, this is the version number that you would use to do that. Okay, and you see that this is a class called do nothing yet. It's using active record, and then it's telling us the version of Rails that we're running right now. Now they define this thing called change. The way these migrations work is you can either migrate up or you can migrate down. When you migrate up, you make all the changes. When you migrate down, you take away all those changes and you undo them. So this change supposedly does both at the same time, but for now, we're going to define both just to kind of let us see it visually. So we define up. Up is what happens when you commit the changes and you create all the changes, and then down is what happens when you basically roll back all those changes and you go back in reverse and you get rid of them. And in between these is where we would start telling it all the different things we want it to do to the database inside of these migration files. And I don't know why my command prompt is going all psycho here. There we go. All right, so we're not going to do much to that yet. But that's how you create a migration file. It's just Rails generate migration, and then you give it the name. But now we're going to create a model, and the migration file comes with that. So we're going to type Rails, not Rails, Rails generate model, and I'm going to call it user. Now don't hit, well, I guess you can hit enter, but there's a convention to naming these models. you always keep it singular because usually you're going to create some sort of table that's going to contain your users, right? So the model is singular because, and then once we hit enter, it's going to create a migration file that will call it plural, and it'll say users. So you'll see that in a minute. So let's hit enter, and we should see something pop up down here. So you can see that we called the model user, and then down here it says create users. Okay, so it makes it plural because that's what we're going to be doing and to the database there. And then you can also see that it did a little bit more too. Created the migration file. It created the new model under the models folder. Okay, and created a couple other things.
So what is it? What exactly is the model? Like, what is it doing?
The model communicates with the database.
Okay.
Through these migration files. I'm sure it does a lot more with the migration, but the migration files are just what you use to set up the database. And then I'm guessing, I could be wrong, but I'm guessing then later on when we start actually pulling things from the database and extracting and updating and all that stuff, that'll be done through the model.
Okay.
But total guess there. But we'll see later on. Okay, so we're going to do now if we take a look at this, it's a little bit different. So here it didn't really do anything. It just defined the chains. We changed it to up and down. Here, because it's a model, it's creating a table called users. Okay, remember we talked about the models usually have one model per table. So we created this model called user, and it correlates to the table, or it's kind of attached to the table called users. Okay, and so it's using this method called create table. It's calling the table users. Okay, and then it's storing that table inside of this variable called t. All right, and we're going to do kind of the same thing. So we're going to define up. All right, so now that we can kind of start getting an idea of what these do. So on the up, when we migrate up, remember it's creating everything, setting everything up. So it creates a table inside of the database called users and stores it inside of T. So what would be the opposite of creating a table?
Remove table?
Yeah, exactly. And how do you get rid of tables? What's kind of the official SQL for that? What's the official term, I guess? Is it delete? Is it die?
Die, yeah.
No.
Right?
I was just kidding. I was being a jerk.
There was something that was die, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was in PHP. That stopped.
Or maybe it was kill. I can't remember.
No, it was die. I think it stopped things from running. So it's in CRUD.
Delete.
Oh, crap.
Delete.
I'm so horrible. Sorry, guys. It's drop. Bad teacher. Drop table. Okay, users. So that's the opposite, right? So if up, it's setting everything up, well, it's creating a table called users. So if we were to migrate this down, we'd have to do the opposite of what we did here, which is drop table users. Now, another really cool thing about these migration files is they're meant to be database independent. In other words, it doesn't matter if you use MySQL, doesn't matter if you use the PostSQL like we're using. It's supposedly doesn't matter what kind of databases you're using. These migration files should be compatible with all of them, which that's really slick too. So once you know the Ruby code to create tables and create columns and all that, you should be good to go with really any kind of database. Now, of course, we're using Heroku, so we have to use the PostSQL to get everything to work. But the good thing is these migration files should work with that. Okay, so now we want to start adding some columns inside of this user database. So we're going to come up here to this line. There's two ways to do it. The first, this is the longhand method. So you can go t.column. Remember, the table is stored inside of this variable called t. So we can say t.column, and let's say the first column we want to add inside this database is first name. Okay, so remember we did the shout box. We had a name and a shout. We added those columns. That's basically what we're doing here. We're creating a column called first name. And then we got to give it a type, and it's going to be a string. Okay, it's going to be characters. Okay, now there's a shorthand method. Rails is smart enough to know that, okay, you created a table, so you're probably going to be creating a bunch of columns on it. So you can just say t.string last name. So that's another way to do it. So these are doing the exact same thing, except for one is the shorthand method. It knows that it's already going to be a column inside that table, so it takes the type that it is, and then that's going to be the name of the column there. Now what we're doing right now, make sure you're taking notes, you're doing whatever you need to do. Yeah, this will be in the video as well. But this is the stuff you'll need to be doing for the assignment. You're going to need to be able to create models, and you're going to need to create these migration files to create stuff in the database that we're going to use later on. And here on our notes, I want to put a couple more things here. So we have column types. All right, we have binary. We have Boolean, date, date time, decimal, float, integer, string, text, time. Or do I have time? No. So the main ones we're going to be using are integer, string, and text. Most of these other ones don't have a whole lot to do with what we're going to be doing, but these are the different types of columns that you can create inside of your tables. Okay, let's see. We can pass in some other stuff as well. So we said this was a string. We can also set limits, and this is how you do it. So if I do that, that's basically saying, okay, this is a string type of column, and there's a limit of 25 characters. By default, the limit, I think, is 255 characters. So if you don't define anything here, it'll just default to 255. Which in most cases will be plenty. So we can do the same thing here. We can say limit 50. Okay, we want to put in some more columns. So I'm going to go t.string. This is going to be a string type. Email. So this is going to be the email column. You can set a default value Okay, and then you can say null false, which basically that's saying if it allows blank fields or not. So if you want to be able to have empty fields inside the database, you just wouldn't define anything here. But if you're like, no, the email definitely needs to have something in there, then you set that to false. Okay, then we're going to have another string, password, and we can set a limit to that as well. So what this does, okay, remember sets up a column. Okay, it calls it first name. It's a string, gives it a limit. This is the shorthand method to do what this is doing up here. So this is setting up a column. It's a string. It's naming it last name. It's giving it a limit. Same thing here. Another string column, email. It sets the default to empty. Okay, and it says false, can't have the empty one. And then string, password, limit 40.
Is there a limit to make it so that it has to have like an @ sign in there, like for the email, so they know it's like a real email?
That's client-side scripting. That'd be JavaScript stuff. And also Chrome, I think, does that by default. If you set up a form through the HTML and you have a method in there and everything, if you have input type equals email, it'll automatically do that for you, which is kind of cool. But I don't think you can, like in this file that we're doing here, the migration, no, I don't think we can set any of that up because this is all database stuff.
Got it.
So that's all done on the client side. Okay, another thing we can add is t.datetime. Okay, and we have a created at. And then we can have a t.datetime. Remember, we're giving it a type. Updated at. And what this does, it'll create two columns inside of your database that say, all right, this was created at, and then it'll timestamp it. And then if you go in there and you update that field or you update that column, it will go in there and create a field there. But we actually don't need that because that's what this does, the t.timestamps. That'll automatically put in a created at and an updated at field, so you can go in there and easily take a look at your database and know when things were messed with or when things were created. So that's what the t.timestamps in there does by default, which is slick. Okay, another thing Rails does by default is it creates an ID column. We don't have to do anything in here. It'll just automatically do it. We did this a little bit with the shout box. We had an auto incrementing field that every time we created a shout, it would automatically give it an ID, the auto incremented. Rails does that by default. So every time something gets inserted inside of this users table, it will give it an ID. So there, and the ID is there, and we're gonna give that an index so it can be searched. And that's one field that you would give an index, and we'll do that in the migration file as well. Also, the index column is called a primary key, which means it's like the main field that you can use to organize things, to search for things. Because remember, again, with the shout box, the shouts were coming up not in the right order, so we had to use that index to kind of order it in descending order so it would actually work. But if for some reason you didn't want that ID column, you can do it up here. So you'd say create users, and then you would say ID, false. if you ever wanted to. But to be honest, I don't know if you'd ever not want to do that. So, just so you're aware. All right, so now let's open pgadmin because we're going to commit these changes and we're going to make sure, and we want to see and verify that actually they happen. So open that up because we want to visually see if the changes we define here actually work or not. So it's going to ask me to log in, I think, usually. There we go. Got my databases, and I will be messing with, pretty sure this is all the development one. So remember, this is stuff I was doing on my own. I got my Heroku development database, and that's the one I'm pretty sure. Let me double check real quick. It should be the development one that it's going to be messing with. So I'm going to expand that down. Now this is kind of, while that's out opening, this user interface, to be honest, is a little, it took me a while to find everything. But if you come down here to schemas, that's where everything's going to be. So you kind of expand that down, and then you have public, expand that down, and then you'll have tables. And this is going to be what we're going to pay attention to here. So if I expand tables, there is nothing right now because we haven't created anything. Okay, we all got that open?
Yep.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So let's commit our changes. So once you've created the migration file, okay, remember when it goes up, it creates all this stuff inside of users. If it migrates down, it just deletes that whole table. So we can commit the changes. So we're going to come over here to the command prompt. Again, make sure you're in the root folder, and all you got to do is type Rails db migrate. And then you hit enter. Uh-oh. Good. I'm having issues. Let me know if it goes through or if you get issues as well.
Mine is good. As far as I can see.
Good. So I'm having a problem. So it ran do nothing yet with no problem. It took 0 seconds because there's nothing in there. So this is the do nothing yet. It ran that just fine. But now I'm having issues here on the debugging on this is actually pretty good. So let's see, create user, syntax error, unexpected, blah, blah, expecting keyword end. Looks like it's on 6.
Oh, I had the same thing too. I thought I was good.
Oh, I think I know what I did. Yeah. So what do you guys think? What would be wrong on this line?
Would we just need to put a comma in between string or like after string?
Right,
and
right here?
No. Oh, mine says that it's. Oh, you do have a comma after that.
I do.
Okay. Mine says mine's on like T column first name and then string and then limit, but I didn't have a comma in there.
So you didn't have a comma there. Okay. Well, how are the equals, when you say something is equal to something, how do you do that in Ruby? Or I guess in these migrations.
Just the equal sign and then the less than, greater than, whatever that is.
Yep. Okay, so
your default doesn't have that.
Default.
Get out of there. All right, cool. So that's a really good thing, is if there's issues with the migration file, it'll yell at you, and that was pretty awesome. It basically told me what line, it told me what it was expecting, what it didn't get, blah blah blah. So that was nice. That helped me find it real easy. So cool. Now I can run it again. So Rails db migrate. Yay.
Cool.
Now, you can see though, it ran do nothing yet that first time, but the second time that I ran it, it didn't. Because it has actually a part of the database that tells you if you've ran a migration file or not. So if I come over here, we can do this, Rails db migrate status. And this will tell us what the status is of our migration files. So we can see that both of them are up. In other words, they've both been ran, and they've both been created, and they've both established everything inside of the database. So because the second time I ran it, it checked, and it's like, oh, do nothing yet is already up, so I don't need to run it again. So it skipped it, and then it ran the create users. So now the question is, okay, it ran it, but what do we have in our database? That's what we want to check. We want to make sure that it created all this stuff. So you can come over here. I usually right-click the actual database, and I do refresh. So that should kind of refresh all the different changes that we did, and hopefully we'll be able to see it. Come down to schemas, go to public, come over here to tables. All right, cool. So now we have some stuff. We have AR internal metadata, which to be honest, I don't even know what's in there. Schema migrations, and then we have users. So if we go inside of users and we go into the columns, okay, cool. Has the ID, okay, because we didn't tell it to not do the ID. Has the first name, last name. That's what we said, first name, last name, email, and password. So it should have all those columns in there. First name, last name, email, and password. And then the created at and updated at was the t-dot timestamps. That's what that added. And then the ID is going to be the primary key that identifies all of the different, that's kind of the main identifier of the blocks of data. We can right-click these. We can go to Properties, and this will show us the general properties here. There's not a whole lot in here that we really need to see, so just get out of that. But this is something that actually took me a little too long to figure out. But I was sitting there trying to see what was in. Remember, with PHP My Admin, we could just go to the main page and see what's inside of the database, like what's the first name and last name and all that. So I was sitting here right-clicking and trying to do that, and you can't. So what you have to do is you have to right-click the table, and then you go to View Data. But what we want to do this one is the schema migrations. Let's take a look and see what's inside of there. So we're going to right-click the schema migrations, go to View Data, and we're going to do View All Rows. Okay, and this will show us what's inside of that table. So what do you think these numbers are inside of the database?
It looks like the numbers from those numbers. Are they the same as those?
Yeah, the
Or
version
they're
numbers.
the models?
Yep. So this is the little table that Rails checks to see if what the status is, if it's up or down. Okay. Now if we go to users and view the data and view all rows, there's nothing in there. But we can see the columns. See that ID's in there. We can see all the different columns that we created. Are we all seeing it? Did your migrations work?
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
It's really important that they work. It's really important that you get this because this is going to be the assignment. Is you created these little test ones here, but later on for the assignment you're going to need to create models and do migrations for each one of the models. All right, now let's head over. We'll do a couple more things and we'll take a break here. So let's see. Now if we take a look in here inside the migrate folder, we can go into the schema file. Okay, and this, remember we talked about the schema. The schema just kind of sets up the whole database. It's information on all the database and everything that was done. So here's the schema of that database. Okay, so it's enabling the extension of the PostSQL that we're using, and then it just kind of lists everything that we did. So developers can use these schemas to get in and see exactly how the databases are set up and what's going on inside of them. All right, we'll do two more things and we'll take a break. So
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I wanted to update create users, what would I type in into Ruby? Because I had a typo that I need to update.
So actually what we're going to do right now, we'll do that. So let's say our name is Charles and we want to update something in our database. So this is how we could do it. So we can roll back those changes that we just did. So we did the Rails, DB migrate, and that set everything up. But let's say, we made a mistake. We need to roll things back, and then we got to put them back up there. So the way you can do that is you go Rails DB migrate space version, all in caps, equals 0. So remember, these are version numbers, right? So we're going to say, all right, migrate back to version 0, which is basically the beginning, before we did anything. Okay? And if we go and we take a look at our migration, well, this is what we do when we migrate up. We create all this stuff, but when we go back down, we drop table users. So we just delete everything that we did here. Okay, so hit enter.
What was the command you typed in again? Sorry. Rails DB migrate. I was trying to write it down instead of actually typing it.
So Rails DB migrate version equals 0.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and then you can see what happens there. So it doesn't really do anything to do nothing yet because there's nothing to do. But here, it reverted back. It deleted that whole table. So now again, we can go Rails DB migrate status. And they're both down, which, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So now if we come back here and we refresh, we should see all of those tables gone. or at least the users anyways. They're still the schema migrations. That's okay. But the users table should be gone because that's what we said. We said drop the users table. And just because I'm wondering, I wonder what the heck's in here. So this is defining. Okay, all right, this is defining the base. Okay, it looks like it's just defining it's the development database. Okay, cool. All right, so then all you would do is go back in here, change whatever you missed or whatever, and then just migrate it again.
The Rails DB migrate?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you just like make your changes and then just migrate it again? Like to just do the Rails DB migrate again rather than like undoing it and then putting it back up. Like would it?
My only guess would be conflictions. You know, like in Charles' case, like say he misspelled like first name and then he did a bunch of stuff and then all these things depend on it being misspelled. And so then if he didn't undo all those changes and then put them back up, you would still have all those dependencies, I think, on the misspelled column name. Okay. That's one thing I can think of, but
I kind of thought it would be like if you're in a like an Illustrator file and you exported it to a PDF and then you went and made a change in there and then just like replace the PDF when you export it again. Does that make sense?
I don't know. That
was probably a bad example.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. And let's try it. So I could say I'm going to misspell like first name here. It's not going to break. It's just going to create a first name. So we'll go, because I don't know. It might work that way, to be honest. I'm not sure. All right, so it creates it. I'm going to refresh the tables. Okay, there's users. Now if I go inside of users, first name, it's wrong. So I don't know. Let's see what happens if I try to migrate that again when it's correct. I wonder if it'll yell at me. It might yell at me because they're both up. It might be like, hey, we already did that. So let's see. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it's like, look, we already migrated it up. Why do you want us to migrate it up again? Because it goes.
So you always have to migrate it back down.
Yeah. Because remember, It has that database saying if it's been migrated or not, and if it's already been migrated up, it's just gonna skip it and it's not gonna do it again.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, yeah.
I feel like I'm gonna write that down.
So I gotta migrate it back down. And then migrate it back up. So fun. Bam. And you don't have to refresh the whole database like I was doing before. You can just refresh the tables, so that's good to know. View data, view all rows, and then first name is spelled right now. Fun.
Sweet.
Yeah, let's do one more thing, then break time. So anyways, so you got Rails DB migrate. There's a couple other commands. So let's say I had 10 different versions of the database and I wanted to revert back to a certain one. There's a way you can do that. It's just Rails DB migrate up, and then you just have to define what version. So you basically have to go in here, find the version number, copy it, and then put it in here inside of version. And then it wouldn't, because when you just say migrate, it just migrates all the way up to the most current version. So if there's 10 different versions, it would migrate to version 2, then it would migrate to version 3. It would go through all of them up to version 10. But if you're like, no, go directly from the version you are now to version 10, then you would just throw in the version number here inside a version, and then it would go straight to whatever one you tell it to. Okay, and that's the same with down. You can say migrate down to whatever version you want. And then I guess this probably would have worked in Charles' case. You can say redo, which kind of is like a refresh. It's take it down and then immediately take it back up.
Oh. And you just leave for the redo, you leave version just blank like that?
That's a good question. I was about to say I'm not sure. So, I don't know. Let's try it, see what it does. It might yell at us and say it wants a version number. No, it does everything. Cool.
Awesome.
So this would be this would have been what you would have used. It would have been, you could have done it all in one command there. So it dropped the tables. Okay, and then it went away, and then it went back up, and then it created the tables. So yeah, that's kind of the refresh command then there, I guess. Sweet. Okay. All right, guys, go take a break. How long do you want? How long do you need?
20 minutes.
20 minutes it is. Okay, so 40 around 2:55. I'll see you guys back.
Okay.
Okay, bye. Boom. All right, we're back. So now we need to talk about all this stuff, all the different things you can do. I'll try to put them here. I'll comment them out. We're not really going to use any of them, but it's just good to know about them. So first thing is the create table method, okay, which is obvious here. This create table is kind of like a function in the fact that it contains all these things inside of it. So inside you have create table, you store it inside of this variable t, and then you start setting up columns and doing what you want to do there. We talked about drop table, so you can drop tables as well. You can kill them, and this is what we talked about at the beginning of the week or whatever, the beginning of the class, where this is how you can control databases from Ruby, is knowing how to do these things. Okay, another thing you can do that we haven't talked about is you can rename table. Okay, and then you say what table you're going to rename. So in this case, you would do users and then the new name. So awesome users. Okay. You know what? We might actually already be doing a lot of these. Let's see. Yep. Okay, another one you can do is add column. So if you already have an established table, you can add one. You just define what table. Give it a name. So it'd be like add column, I don't know, address. You'd have to give it some sort of type. So in this case, it'd be a string. And then all the different options, like if you want to do default or null or limit or whatever. So go back to the limit of like 30. Okay, you have remove column. So it's just kind of like drop table. You just say what table and what column. So if I wanted to add address and then get rid of it, that's how I do it. Data rename column. So you got the user, like which table it's from, what column it's going to be. Of course, this wouldn't work because I just got rid of address, and then the new name. Then you got change column. So this would be if you wanted to change it to like an integer instead of a string, or basically take all these different options and the type and change it to something else. Okay, we're going to be doing this a little later too, but we talked about indexes. You add indexes to foreign keys, and you also add indexes to any columns that you may use to be that may be searched. But we'll talk about that in a minute. And then with add index, you just say the table that it's on, and then the column that you want to add it to, and then any options. Okay, and just like you can add an index, you can remove an index as well. So the table, and then whatever column you're removing it from. Okay. So we're going to use a majority of these in the next one we're going to do. So now that we've created this migration and this model of users, let's say that we wanted to mess with it and we wanted to change some things. So we're going to go back in here and let's generate another migration here. So we're going to say Rails generate migration. And we're going to call it alter user or alter users. This isn't a model, so it's okay if it's plural. It's just when you're creating the models when you want it to be singular, and then the thing that it creates is plural. All right, so we got alter users now. So we're going to do kind of the same thing we did here, is define up. Then we're going to find down. So this is basically like once we've created that user table, we want to go in there and we want to say we had a bunch of stuff in there that we wanted to change, that we wanted to alter. So we're going to use a bunch of the stuff that we kind of talked about. So we'll type this out. We'll see if we can get it to work. And if you can, then you should be able to do the assignment for today. So first thing we're going to do is rename the table. We're going to rename it from users to admin users. Let's say we wanted to add a column. So we got to say what table we're going to add it onto. Now this is where we need to pay attention to what we're doing here, because we've just renamed users to admin users. So if we started start telling it to do stuff to the table of users, it's not going to work. So we got to start saying all the table we're going to be doing stuff to is admin users now. And say we want to add the column of user name. And it needs to be a string. We have to define that. And we'll give it a limit of 25. Then another thing you can say is what column you want it to be after. So I can say I want this to be after the column of email. So just some more options you can throw in there. So to this database, we're adding a column inside the admin users table called username. It's going to be a string, limited 25 characters, and it's going to go after the email column, because in here we create that email column. And then if we wanted to mess with the column, we could do that. So again, this is going to be an admin users. The column we want to mess with is email. And then maybe we want the limit to be 100 now. You can rename the column. So again, we're just kind of doing what we just talked about, all the different things you can do. And once you've done this a little bit, this ends up being a lot easier than SQL would ever be, because it just seems to make a little bit more sense.
On the change column,
Yeah.
The column will still stay after email even if we don't put that in there when we changed it?
This adds the column of username after email, and then all this is doing is targeting the column of email, and it's like, because before we have no limit, and so what we're doing here is we're just adding a limit to it of 100.
Oh, sorry, I thought that we were still changing username.
Nope.
And not. Never mind, just kidding.
Nope, yeah, we're changing the email column, not the username.
Got it.
Okay, and then so rename column, you just put in the table, the column that you're messing with, and what you want it to be called now. And we say we want it to be hashed password, because maybe before we weren't encrypting the password and now we are. So we need to change that to hashed password. We can also have stuff print out. Puts is kind of like echo. I think we talked about that before. So we could say something like puts. Maybe we want to make a little note there for us to remind us that, hey, this adds an index. This is what's going to get printed out in our command prompt. So we need to add an index. We're going to add it to admin users. And then we're going to add it to the username field or column. So remember, the common practice of adding indexes is to foreign keys. So any column that has a foreign key and any that's going to be searchable that you may use to search. And we'll talk about that when we get to the assignment. So now the question is, how the heck are we going to write the down? We've defined everything that's going to happen up. So what would be the first thing we would put inside the down migration?
Would it be drop and then the admin user?
Now, we wouldn't want to drop the whole table because that would erase everything, because we're not creating anything here. All we're doing is taking existing things and we're manipulating them. So if we were to drop the table, that would be bad, because that would get rid of the whole table and all the information in it. So basically we want to just reverse what we've done here and undo it. So
you'd have to put drop index and then admin users username and
yeah, exactly. So the first thing we'd want to do is remove index, because the last thing we did was add the index. So basically we just want to go reverse back up. So
why is it remove and not drop?
Because drop is, I don't know. I know drop is usually
Drop doing like the whole table, and remove is just, I guess, removing aspects of the table.
Yeah, because drop would be like deleting the whole table. I think you can drop columns as well, I think. Or wait, or is it delete column? But this is
I think you can drop a column.
This is Ruby stuff as well, so it might just be just how they decided to make it. Let's see here. I'm checking my notes. Yeah, it's remove column. So I don't know. I think that's just how the Ruby guys set it up.
Okay.
But it might be also what you said too. Like drop is like removing the whole table, where remove you're just getting parts of it. All right. So the last thing. So when you do a drop migration or a down migration, you got to just kind of do it in backwards order. So the last thing we did is add index. So the first thing we want to do here is remove that index. So we're going to remove it from admin users, and we're going to remove it from the column called username. Okay, we can ignore the puts here. So then we rename the column to admin users. We basically renamed password to hash password, so we have to reverse that. So rename column from the table of admin users. We're going to name it from hashed password, and we're going to name it back to password. Okay, so then the next thing we did is we changed the column inside of admin users. Okay, we're messing with email, and then we need to know so we're going to keep it as a string. That never changed. But we could basically go back to, limit equals whatever it was before. I think the default was 255. So we can just change it back to what it was.
Oh wait, never mind. Ignore me.
We can also come back here and say, all right, what did we set up here to begin with? Well, we gave it a default of blank, and we said null equals false, so we could come back here and just kind of do the same thing if we wanted to. So we could say, default is back to blank. Okay, then we added the column, so we'll want to remove that. The column was inside of admin users. And we added username, so we'll just want to get rid of that. We don't have to define any options or anything because we're just getting rid of it. And the first thing we did up here, so the last thing we need to do down here is rename the table back to what it was. So rename table from admin users back to users. that in the way. So now we can just kind of take a look, refresh. It's still users. So in theory, when we run this, it's going to rename it from users to admin users. And it's going to set up all these different columns and rename things. And so we can, check to see if that happens. So Rails DB migrate. I already forgot, so I'm going to check the status here. Okay, so do nothing yet's been ran. Create users has been ran. So alter users hasn't. So when we do Rails DB migrate, it's only going to run the alter users, which is what we want. So I will run it. Let's see if we have any issues. Okay, migrated. Looks like we're good. It kind of puts through everything that it did, how long it took. So if I come over here to my tables and refresh, yep, admin users. It's called admin users now. If I come over.
I had an error with mine.
Sorry?
I had an error with mine.
All right. So it should tell you what line it is. And then hash password was changed as well, so we know it ran correctly. So what issue are you getting?
It's on the alter users RB, and it says it's line 3. The rename table users.
Take a look. Make sure everything's spelled right. Make sure you got all your quotes, period, or comma in the right spot.
Yeah. Right. Oh, there's a space in between there. Maybe that's what did it. Nope. Still there. It's pointing right in between users and admin users when I put rename table. I have parentheses, open quotes, users, close quotes, comma, space, open quotes, admin underscore users, close quotes, close parentheses. Everything looks fine. I'm missing something.
Check.
It says unexpected comma, expecting parenthesis, quote parenthesis. What?
Check the other line too, and make sure you renamed it to up and down. Also make sure you have all the correct ends. You have an end on line 9 and then the 2 ends at the bottom.
Yep, those are all there. Should I take a screenshot?
Yeah, if you want to do that, send it to us.
There's 2 pictures because I'm using 2 screens. So.
Okay.
But the first one is, can you read that? The first one is where it says the syntax error, and then the second one is my actual code.
Okay, so let's take a look at the...
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Did anybody die?
Nope, I'm just knocking things over.
Just raging?
Yep. You know me.
Oh, under your email for Deaf Down, you have... Oh, no, never mind. Sorry.
Oh, you got me all excited.
No, sorry.
He got it. He got it.
Getting my hopes up for no reason.
My bad.
Unexpected comma. It looks like. Expecting a parenthesis.
Should I try to get rid of the comma? See if that works. Well, I'm glad it's not just me. Because I'm usually really good at catching these things, and I have no idea what is wrong. Shh, go lay down, Lily.
Yeah, this is a weird one because I don't see anything. It looks like it's yelling at you because there's a space there, but that shouldn't matter.
Should I try and get rid of the space? Let's see. See if that works.
Keyword end.
It worked. I got rid of the space.
And it worked.
Maybe. I mean, nothing else came up. Like I didn't have any other.
But it went through and ran the way it was supposed to.
I mean, all it did was show up with my, like it was.
Was that 2 spaces or just 1?
It's just 1, and I got rid of the space, and then when I typed it, did I spell that right? Yeah.
Really
Then I
weird.
just went back to my Heroku Polly Hemmingson, like waiting for me to type something, so it didn't give me like a status that it.
Okay, cool. So we're good?
I mean, it didn't say
What
any of.
What if you run the status? Are they all up now? Double check that. Yours looks just like mine, so that's kind of weird.
Yep, they're all up now.
Okay.
So, cool.
Still scratching my head. Well,
Yeah,
That's really weird.
it's probably because it's a Mac. I'll just say that. That's all I'll say. All right. Those dang Macs. Charles, is yours good?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll figure it out.
All right. So then, next thing we'll want to check is bring it back down, right? So db migrate version 0 or equals 0. Just to make sure that our down migration works the way we would hope. The reason you want to do all this is because you want to test and make sure all the migrations work in the development area. So when you put this online or push it to a production server, you know that it's working. You would never, ever, ever want to test these migration files on a production server. Because it could break things. You could lose really important data. I mean, a lot of really bad stuff could happen. So, yeah, it's not stuff you want to mess around with. So it looks like mine worked. So Rails migrate status. Make sure they're all down, which they are. So it looks like mine worked. And then obviously you'll want to come over and take a look at your table. Yep, it dropped the users table, did everything, so I know that we're good. So I'll come back here and run it again. Added the index, we're good to go. Now I'm going to refresh that. Admin users, columns, hash password. Great, we're back up and running. Now, the question that I'm not sure about yet, and that's one of those we'll cross the road when it comes, is if when you take this and push it out to Heroku, if it automatically creates all this database stuff for you. I have no idea. I would think it would, because I don't know how you would run. I'm guessing once you would push this up to Heroku, it would see these migration files and it would hopefully run them and get it all set up for you. Whether it does or not, I have no idea. But that's something to think about. All I know is when I finished what the assignment is for today, I pushed it up to Heroku and it still worked. It didn't change anything. It didn't crash anything. So, and I know before when I was messing with Heroku, when there were issues with the database and such, it flipped out. So we'll see. You know, like I said, as we get to creating the content management system and stuff, we'll see if Heroku freaks out or not. Okay, so anyways, a couple tips before we're done with the migration files. Keep them small and concise. Okay, that makes them easier to use, easier to debug. You wouldn't ever want to create like multiple tables in one migration. Like you should only have basically like what we have. Oh, geez, where are we? Here. You would really only want to create one table per migration. So you have a migration file for each. So if you do run into issues, you're not sifting through hundreds of lines of migration stuff just to figure out what the problem was. And that's really about it. So let's hop over to the assignment, take a look at what we need to be doing here. Close out of these. I didn't really want to talk about the assignment until we went through everything, so it'd make a little bit of sense. Okay, so we talked about creating tables. We've done that in columns inside of the database using the migrations file. We did that. So the type of content management system we're going to be making is going to have kind of three sections. It's going to have a section, and then under each section it'll have pages, and then when you click on a page, it'll have subjects inside of that page. And we're going to store that information inside of a database. So we got to create these tables inside of the database that are going to be housing this stuff. The section, the pages, and the subjects. So think of it kind of, the navigation would be kind of like, this would be the section, right? So like week 4 would be the section. It drops down, it gives me this database migration page. I click on it, and then this would be the subject, the content basically. So basically what we have set up here in eCompanion is going to be similar to what we'll be building. So the section is going to be kind of the weeks here. The page is going to be the drop downs for each week, and then the subject is the content on each page, which would be this stuff. Okay, so each one of these are going to have their own tables. So, and then it talks about the foreign keys and such. So this is what you got to do. You're going to generate 3 models like we did today, but you're going to call it subject, page, and section. Remember, they need to be singular, not plural. So that'll create a migration page of subjects, and that'll create a table called subjects. That model will create a table called pages, and then that model is going to create migration called sections, a table called sections. And then I have a little note here, hey, when you generate a model, a migration file is automatically created for it, like we saw. Okay, so then for the subjects table, or the subjects model, you got to have the following columns. A name, which is going to be a string. You got to have a position column, and then you got to have a visible column. So name is going to be a string, position is going to be an integer, and then visible is going to be a Boolean value, in other words, true or false. It can only be true or false. So we can go into the database and set, for one of the subjects, we could set the Boolean value to false, and then it wouldn't be viewable by people. That's how we can make pages private or public. Okay, so for the subjects table, just like we did in here, so you'll have like a create table, and it's going to be subjects. You got to go in here and you got to create columns for that table. So you got to create a name column, which is a string. Got to create a position column, which is an integer. You got to create a visible column, which is going to be Boolean. Okay, then for the pages table, you're going to create a subject ID. You're going to create a name, permalink, position, visible. You're going to create columns for those tables as well. And just so you know, the position here is going to define what order the subjects go in. Same here with the position here. It's going to define what order the pages display in. And the visible as well controls whether it's shown or not. The permalink, if you don't know what a permalink is, if you go to like a blog that teaches you how to wash a dog or something, up in the URL, you'll go to the blog and up here it'll say /how-to-wash-a-dog. So inside of the URL, it has basically the name of the blog post. That's a permalink. Okay, and this is going to be searchable, so you want to give that an index. Okay. The subject ID, okay, that's going to define, this is going to be a foreign key because this subject ID is going to define what table or what section this page is under. So we have week 3, week 4, week 5, right? And then we have pages underneath them. It's going to be the same thing. So if we had a subject ID for database migrations, this would define that it's under section week 4. So this is going to be what we talk about, this foreign key thing, where this is going to help define what page this section is under. So it has to talk with the subjects table to be able to define which subject it's under. So that's going to need to have an index as well. Okay, name is just going to be name of the page. Permalink, again, it's going to be that search engine friendly URL. Position and visible, we talked about it. Okay. Then after you've created the pages table, you're going to create a sections table. So this is going to be like the drop downs. Okay, you have a page ID, which is the same thing. This is a foreign key as well that defines what section or what page the section is under. So again, foreign key that defines what page the section that you're on is under. Okay, so that's going to need to have an index as well. Then name string, position integer, visible Boolean, content type. Okay, the content type is going to be the content that goes inside of the section. Oh, no, sorry. Content type is going to be what kind of stuff is going to be inside of that section. And then content's going to be the actual content. Now you see they all have string, integer, or booleans, but down here this has text. And that's because string only gives you a limitation of a certain amount of characters. We don't want that, so we're going to use text. So that gives us an unlimited amount of characters for that column. Okay, so remember, like we did a couple times, when you create these migration files, get rid of change and do define up and down. Okay, like we did here. We got the define up, and then we have the define down. This is important. So really, it's not going to be too hard. When on the down migrations, all you have to do is just drop the table, like we did here. So you'll have all the creating, you'll have all the strings that you're creating, all the columns that you're creating, and then for the down migration, all you got to do is just drop that table, get rid of it. Okay, I kind of tell you here, add indexes to subject ID and permalink on the pages table, okay, and add an index to the page ID on the sections table. So I tell you right here where you need to add the indexes. Okay, and we talked about that, remember, right there, and we added the index here. So add index, the name of the table, and then the name of the column that you're adding it to. Not too hard.
Does index need to be at the bottom? Does that not matter?
Yeah, you'll need to make sure that it's, well, I mean, if you try to add an index to a column that like doesn't exist, then yeah, you'll have some issues. So you're probably, well, and here's the thing also, remember you have, I don't know if you call this a function or what, but you have the create table function that does all of this stuff. And then after everything's created, that's where you would start adding the indexes. Because they have to be created first for you to be able to add an index. So if I came up here and I'm like, okay, add an index here to first name, it wouldn't be able to because first name hasn't been created yet. So
right.
That was a great question because, and also, yeah, you can't put add index in here. It has to be outside. Has to be outside this little function thing or whatever that actually creates the tables and all the different columns. Okay, so once you have that, run them. Make sure they work. Okay, check your pgadmin. Make sure that you have all those different tables in there. Make sure you have all the different columns in those tables. Your pgadmin. So then once you've run it and they work and everything's good, the things you got to turn in are just a screenshot showing the 3 tables and the columns for each one. So you would come in here and be like, okay, let's say this was my pages table. I just drop down the column, and I take a screenshot of that, just showing that the table was actually created with those columns. And so you can try to combine them into one if you want, into one screenshot. I don't think you're going to be able to do all 3. So if you want to combine 2, that's fine, and then do another one. It really doesn't matter to me. And then the other thing I need is just the status of your migrations. I just want you to run the status, and then it should just say up. You should have a migration for each table. So you'll have the sections migration, you'll have the pages migration, and you'll have the subjects. This shouldn't take you too long. I mean, 10, 15, 20 minutes, if that. If you know what you're doing, if you're paying attention and you were taking good notes and you have the video to go back and look at. Shouldn't take you too long at all. But yeah, that's it. Questions? We good? Do you know what you need to do?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Highly recommend. I mean, if you don't have time, cool. But if you do have time, I would just do this now, right after, while it's fresh on your mind. Just get it done, get it set up. But if you can't, that's fine. But just do what you got to do to remember it and get her done. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. Let me know if there's any problems. Email me, but this should be pretty straightforward. So good luck and have fun.
All right. Sounds good.
And this.
So much fun.
Any questions before we take off?
Are you linking this in the same place as last time?
Am I doing what? Sorry.
Are you linking the YouTube video in the same place?
Yeah, I can put it up here and I'll email it out to you guys as well, just like I did last week.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
Sound good.
All right, guys. Have an awesome week. We will see you next week.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye, guys.
See ya.